Hello rugby family around the world, welcome to Inside Rugby. My name is Mark, coming to you live from Cancun in Mexico. In today's video I'm going to be reviewing the game that was just played between the New Zealand All Blacks and the Australian Wallabies in front of 83,944 people in Melbourne, Australia. Let's find out what happened. Well, there's something like 750,000 New Zealanders living full-time in Australia, and there was a lot of them in the 83,944 that packed into the Melbourne cricket ground tonight to watch the All Blacks play Australia. A much anticipated game, this one. Many thought the Wallabies were going to have a good chance. I was one of those people, and there was a lot of expectation around the game. Of course, it was round 3 game for these two teams in the Rugby Championship. Up until this game, the All Blacks had won 2 and the Wallabies had lost both of their games against Argentina and South Africa. So a huge crowd in at the MCG. Wayne Barnes was the referee tonight, and yeah, after the kickoff we saw some pretty good exchanges between the two teams, and I thought that the Australians did very well in the opening minutes to keep a lid on the game. They showed their hand in terms of being up fast in defence, and they forced the All Blacks into a little bit of pressure. But what started off telling in this game was, once the All Blacks did get their hands on some consistent possession by being very powerful and going very direct, they were able to put points on the board, and that's what happened in the first few minutes. That try by Frizzell came on the back of a huge crushing tackle by Scott Barrett, and just very close to the Wallabies line after the Wallabies got caught from their line out. And I think that moment in the game actually set it up for Scott Barrett to have a really good game, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit more in this video. I thought in the beginning of that first half the halves of the Wallabies played pretty well. Tate McDermott at halfback and Carter Gordon started fairly well. They started to open up the play a little bit. Nawaqantar Wasi got involved in a couple of breaks, and it just showed in those first few minutes that the fleet of foot from the Australians, a bit of dancing and a bit of tippy toes, was causing the All Blacks a little bit of a problem. They couldn't get their defensive line accurate enough to stop those breaks, and then also Corey Betty was fantastic in punching forward from the Australians. But every time the All Blacks got possession and they started to roll downfield in their own mauls and breakouts, they started to show some of the signs that the Aussies could be opened up, and there was a period of sustained pressure there that the All Blacks put on the Wallabies. The Wallabies scored though and came back on the scoreboard to 7 points to 5. And at that point we thought, okay, this could be a close game. The Wallabies have started well. The question mark was going to be whether they could sustain this pressure for 80 minutes. That was going to be the telling factor, I think, and whether or not, when it came time to empty their bench, was it going to be able to stand up to the All Blacks. Then we saw what I would describe as a disjointed kind of 10 or 15 minutes of play in the middle of the first half. And it was a bit like a chess match rather than a rugby game. We saw lots of kicking from fullbacks and the back line to each other's half. There was a series of about 3 or 4 kicks there in a row at one stage, and the game just seemed to lose itself a little bit at that moment, with both teams not really finding a way through. The All Blacks were getting taken down well. Will Skilton was playing well for the Wallabies and stealing a lot of possession from breakdowns. And the kicks weren't just accurate enough, I think, to break up the play for either team at that stage. Aaron Smith was doing some darting runs down the blind side, and he started to make that a bit of a theme in the first half, and it was catching the Aussies out every now and again, and it was making a lot of territory for the All Blacks and putting the Aussies under a lot of defensive pressure, and they were using up a lot of energy at that stage. And then we saw Corey Betty get yellow carded, and I think that started to shift the momentum a little bit for the Kiwis, and after that we saw Cody Taylor go in for a try, again after sustained pressure from the All Blacks and rolling mauls and taking territory away from Australia. The Australian defence was falling off, and it was just sheer pressure and also relentless energy that the All Blacks were putting into those mauls, and I think that's what finally broke the Wallabies down, and Taylor was able to get in for a try. So Corey Ebete off the field, Taylor in for a try, and the All Blacks opened up a little bit of a gap. So it was 12-7 after that passage of play, and Mo'unga had got the conversion over from Cody Taylor's try. Then a significant thing happened in the game. After a scrum, Alan Alalatoa for the Wallabies, of course their captain today, playing in his 66th test cap for the Wallabies, was unfortunately injured. Went down badly on the bottom of a scrum push from the All Blacks, and word out is that he's ruptured his Achilles tendon, which is a very sad piece of news if that is confirmed. He will be missing the World Cup this year, and a huge blow to the Australian forward pack, having Alalatoa out of that squad to go to the World Cup. But as I say, that's yet to be confirmed, but he did get stretchered off. He didn't look good. So yeah, not good for Alalatoa at all. The All Blacks kept putting the pressure on, and one was starting to think now that they were starting to really get into this game and wind it up against the Wallabies, who were doing a lot of defensive work, and there was a lot of energy being spent on both sides as we got towards the end of the first half. I thought Mark Telea was having a great game for the All Blacks. When Smith was doing those darting runs down the left hand side, he was getting inside his man on a number of occasions and getting good offloads. The tight three from the All Blacks were always in the play. We saw Dalton Papali'i make a couple of good turnovers. We saw Adi Savia being there at the right time, and Shannon Frizzell was everywhere around the field as well, both in offense and defense. So I thought the tight three in that first half for the All Blacks were playing very, very well. On the Aussie side, Tom Hooper was having a good game. He was everywhere in that first half. I thought Will Skelton really stepped up. I mentioned in my preview video that he needed to show us something today, and he did in that first half. He was a man mountain. He stole a lot of ball at breakdown. He was good in the line out. Good effort from him in the first half. Angus Bell was back after an extended break. He hasn't played a lot at all this year, and in fact I think this was his second game of rugby. So yeah, Angus Bell was having a good game indeed. I thought the halves, as I said, were doing all right for the Aussies until towards the end of the first half, where the All Blacks started to push and dominate a little bit more. Then they got caught wanting a little bit, and you could see some of the inexperience, but also the pace at which the All Blacks were starting to put on the game was starting to sap the energy of those Australians. Callaway was good at the back, didn't do anything spectacular, but made a couple of breaks, and was good in that first half for the Wallabies. Mo'unga was really solid in that first half. Aaron Smith had a great first half, I thought, darting everywhere. His passes were spot on most of the time. I think he only did one or two that went to ground. Beauden Barrett was injected with a few strategic kicks, and Will Jordan, whenever he got the ball, always looked dangerous from the All Blacks. Geordie Barrett was strong in the centres in the first half, as was Rieko Waiani, without really seeing those two being dominant, because Australia was putting it up the middle a little bit to those two guys. So as the All Blacks do time and time again, they got a try just before half time. Will Jordan went over in the corner after a great build up again, and the presence of the right hand side players to get the ball out to Jordan for an easy touchdown, and the All Blacks went into the break at 19 points to 7. And how many times does it happen the All Blacks score and put pressure on just at the end of a half? And I think that was a really telling statement in this game, because it allowed them to go into the sheds at half time with that lead, and to regroup and to have a discussion around what the Australians were doing well. They were fast in the breakdown. In fact, I thought in the first half the breakdowns were pretty much 50-50 throughout that first half, if we're going to be fair. I think the Australians were as active and as energised. They were falling off a little bit towards the end of that first half, and it was going to be a question or not whether the Australians were going to be able to come out and keep the intensity going in the second half, or was that All Black try just before half time going to make the big difference for the All Blacks in this game? What was impressing me in this game up until half time was the All Blacks defence. I think they were putting a lot of energy into that. Before the game, Sevilla had talked in the press conference about how hard they've been working on their defence, and their defensive patterns in that first half seemed to be really holding the Australians out. And despite a couple of line breaks from the Australians, they never really looked like they were going to take on that All Black backline and get through their defence on a consistent basis. So that was probably the standout point for me in the first half, was the All Blacks defensive patterns and the strength of their defence. I thought the Aussies had a good first 25 minutes. I thought they were in the game. They played strong and spontaneous. They said they were going to open it up, and they did that. So at half time, even though it was 19 points to 7, whoever was going to score first in the second half, I think it was really going to make the difference in this game and give a lot of momentum and positive attitude for the rest of the game. Well, the Aussies came out in the second half and they really applied the pressure to the All Blacks. There was some good play from them, both in close and also through the back line. And they were down in the All Black 22 for quite a considerable amount of time, putting a lot of phases together. But once again, the All Blacks defense was very, very good. And there was a crucial moment after about 16 minutes in the second half where the Australians had pretty much had lots of the ball in the second half, and Adi Savia did a turnover, stole the ball in a maul, did a turnover, and that was a huge win for the All Blacks and gave them a lot of confidence. You could see at the time on the field of play, the All Black brothers came around Adi Savia and gave him a huge pat on the back. A great leader of this team and well-respected guy. And he knew, along with the rest of the All Blacks at that particular point in time, that that was a really significant period of this game, was that moment where Savia got that steal. And the next thing that happened in the second half was unfortunately another injury issue for the Wallabies. Taniela Tupou, who came on for Alan Alalatoa, got injured also. It looked like he damaged his back in one of the plays that was heading towards the All Black line. He got up very gingerly. And man, I got to hand this guy some kudos. He stayed on the field for quite a while. He was obviously in a huge amount of pain, but he was respecting that yellow jersey and he didn't want to go off the field of play. He knew what a big moment it was, but you could tell by the ensuing scrums and open play that Tupou wasn't going to last long. His back, or whatever the injury is, was very, very significant, and eventually he had to succumb. But he also got yellow carded for doing a head charge on one of the All Blacks. I think it was Frizzell that was coming forward with the ball at that stage. So yeah, Tupou had to go off, and that really disrupted, I think, the Wallabies forwards. They had to work out whether Angus Bell was going to be back on the field. He'd been replaced, and he actually came back on and then was yellow carded. So the Wallabies were down a man, but they had to have Angus Bell back on for scrum. So things like that in games, you know, they disconnect the momentum of the game for a team. And I'm not saying that at all that would have made any difference to the game's outcome, but I'm just saying that would have not helped the Wallabies with those two significant scrum injuries from their two props. And then after that sustained pressure in the second half from the Wallabies, it happened once again. The All Blacks got the ball. They had a great broken play down the left-hand side of the field. Annett Lennon-Brown was on for the All Blacks. He charged towards the Wallabies line, got held up just a little bit short, and then the ensuing play, Caleb Clark, who'd come on, went over for a try just after about a minute of being on the field. So that was really the point of the game where one thought, okay, the All Blacks are now going to put the pedal to the metal, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the Wallabies either respond to this or capitulate. And the pressure was really put on from the All Blacks. They started to empty the bench, and Brodie Retallick went off. Sam Whitelock came on along with the rest of the forwards as well. So after 60 minutes, the All Blacks had rushed out to 26 points to 7. There didn't look to be a way back for the Aussies at this stage, and it was just a question of how many more the All Blacks were going to get, I think. We saw the changes being ringed by both teams, and Aaron Smith went off with after 60 minutes or so with a great game today, I thought. and Cam Roigard got his first run-on test for the All Blacks at the Melbourne Cricket Ground in front of 84,000 people. That must have been a huge buzz and sensation for him coming on at that game, and it was really interesting to see Roigard get get a 20-minute spell in this All Black team. And then things went from bad to worse for the Wallabies. Mark Talia went over for a try after a really great passage of play. Will Jordan having the presence of mind to flip the ball over the top to Talia so he could score in the corner. And it was basically game over at that stage, I thought, for the Wallabies, and the All Blacks were really starting to put pressure on and show their intensity for the whole game, really. And then Rieko Ioane scored a try, and it was then starting to get a little bit embarrassing for the Australians, because they did play pretty well in that first 20-25 minutes. I thought it was a game of chess. It was a little bit scrappy at times as well, but the Wallabies were in there. They showed that they could give it a go, and I think it was probably their best 20 minutes of rugby so far in the Rugby Championship. Let me know what you think about that, whether you agree with me on that particular first half 20-minute effort by the Wallabies. So after that Ioane try in the 67th minute, the All Blacks were out to 38 points to 7. Richie Mo'unga had a great day with the boot today. His kicking was very good, both at conversions and also in the field of play. And just late in the game, he had the presence of mind to see that Andrew Callaway, the Australian fullback, was out of position. He put in a kick towards the Australian line, ran up, and unfortunately he pushed Marika Koroibete in the back. He picked up the ensuing ball and went over and scored what could have been a try that was disallowed by Wayne Barnes, and there was no extra points added to the score at that stage. So the All Blacks winning this particular game by 38 points to 7. It was a very impressive display, I must say, from the All Blacks, I thought, and I think their defence won them this game. They put up with a lot of pressure from the Wallabies at different stages during the game. And as soon as they got possession and they were able to put pressure of their own, they made that into scoreboard points, which is all the key to international rugby. If you're getting a lot of possession, you've got to convert that into points, and that's what the All Blacks did effectively today. Scott Barrett, and I've got a couple of my audience here on my channel that don't like Scott Barrett, obviously, but I hope you do appreciate and are fair enough to say that he had a great game today. He was immense around the field. That crushing tackle on Tate McDermott will live in Tate McDermott's mind for a long time, I'm pretty sure of that. And that led to Shannon Frizzell's try in the first half. So a great performance from Scott Barrett for me. I thought the All Black top front three, the tight three, did a really good game against the Wallabies. Their scrum was sound. The All Black line-out was good with Brodie Retallick and Scott Barrett in there. And the back three, Frizzell and Savi and Papali'i, played really, really well as well around open play, getting the ball, cleaning out, and their distribution to the inside backs was really, really good. So I think the All Blacks across the park were good today. In fact, they were very good today, and we saw enough to say that, you know, this Rugby Championship competition has given them enough confidence and combinations now to head into the Bledisloe game 2 in Dunedin next weekend, and probably give Ian Foster, Jason Ryan and Joe Smith a little opportunity to maybe try out a couple of new combinations, although I think they'll be pretty keen to keep this momentum going within this team. But yeah, really, really good performance. As far as the Wallabies go, look, they're going to be devastated. 3 losses from 3 games. Eddie Jones has come in his new tenure in charge of this Wallabies team, and it hasn't gone well from a scoreboard point of view. But I think we saw enough in that first 20 minutes that the Wallabies they've definitely got the potential there. They've got the potential to take it to the top teams, but whether they're lacking that 80-minute ability, that's yet to be seen, because they haven't been able to hold it together. And as soon as the pressure came on, the intense pressure that the All Blacks are able to put the Wallabies under, we saw them fold a little bit. So that's going to be a big question mark over the Wallabies moving forward. But I was impressed with their first 20 minutes in the first half. Their fleet-footed players and the backs in particular have a huge amount of potential. We're going to see a lot of them in the World Cup, I'm sure, and they're going to do some damage to some teams. Where to for Eddie Jones and his group right now? Well, back to the drawing board. They don't have a huge amount of time before the next game, which is only a week away in Dunedin. It's going to be a big one for them, as is every single game at the moment. and then they've only got one more game before the World Cup kicks off. The fortunate thing for the Australians is they're not in a difficult pool in the World Cup, so they are going to have some leeway, I think, to be able to build themselves into the tournament, but we're going to have to see how that plays out. And I'm going to be doing many more videos leading up to the World Cup about my thoughts around all the teams, all the critical teams in those pool groups, so we'll have a look at that in future videos. So make sure you hit the old subscribe button here on Inside Rugby and follow us along. I'm going to be covering the warm-up games as well. On the All Black side, I thought it was a comprehensive win today. Ian Foster and team will be very happy with that. Right across the park we saw players stepping up and playing really well. It's not easy going to Melbourne in front of 84,000 people and turning it on as the All Blacks did, but again, I want to give them kudos for the defensive efforts today. I think that's what definitely won the All Blacks this match. Once they were able to get that defensive pressure on and they won some ball, they were able to use that ball very effectively, and they are super dangerous when they get ball in open play, and they can turn around teams very quickly. And as we saw in that second half, we saw the scoreboard just rush ahead from the All Blacks as soon as they got a sniff of getting on top of Australia. And all the teams that face the All Blacks in the World Cup are going to have to watch out for that. We've seen that in the first two games with their intensity in the first 20 minutes. We saw it again today in that 20 minutes in the middle of the second half, and the All Blacks just have the ability to be able to turn that on, and that's going to be a weapon during the Rugby World Cup. So a good game of rugby, a good tight first 20 minutes, a bit of a non-event for a few minutes there in the middle of the first half, and then just before half time, the critical time where the All Blacks scored points, went into the sheds, and then came out in the second half, and after withstanding some solid Australian pressure in that first 16-18 minutes, they were able to turn it over and score 3 quick tries. So a great win from the All Blacks. Let me know what you think. If you watched the game, I'd like to hear your comments and tell me what you thought of the game. Do you think the All Blacks nailed this one? Do you think Australia showed a glimmer of hope? Do you think there's potential yet in this Australian team? And if you think Eddie Jones is not the right guy for the job, let me know in the comments who you think should be the Australian coach, if you think there should be somebody else there. It's a bit of a non-event talking at the moment though, heading into the World Cup. Okay, so there we go. Thanks very much for watching my videos. I'm going to be back soon with more videos. Today's game, Argentina against South Africa, and also Italy playing Scotland over there in Europe. So we're going to be following all those games right here on Inside Rugby. Hope you follow along with me. Until next time, stay safe, stay well everybody, and remember to enjoy your rugby. Bye for now.